Void Mage Gamer is now partnered with Flipside Gaming, so you can use the promo code on their website, all caps, Void Mage, to get 10% off all orders $10 or more. It's a great way that you can support both Flipside Gaming and Void Mage Gamer's channel. Hello guys, welcome back to another Top 10 Commander video. We of course have the new core set M20. Similar to last year with M19, we see a lot of Commander options. One of my biggest criticisms that I get is assuming that legendary creatures are designed for Commander, when obviously these are standard legal sets, so you don't know for certain, but when they're 3-colored, it's kind of obvious that they were meant for Commander, because you just don't see that many 3-color legendary creatures see standard play. So when I assume that these creatures are meant for Commander, it's usually because of their design. It's not something you commonly see in standard. You're not going to see a lot of standard play out of these creatures. So let's start it off here with honorable mentions. Of course, we have to acknowledge some pretty good reprints. The Scry lands were desperately needed. We haven't seen them in a while. Really good budget lands. They don't cost that much. The Ley Lines are really good reprints as well. We have some pretty expensive ones. And Ley Line of Anticipation sees a ton of Commander play. But some newer cards that I think are going to see some play, but I didn't think they were good enough to make the top 10. Corpse Knight, a little bit of the same in black and white. We have a ton of things that force your opponents to lose life on ETB, you gain life on ETB. Boulder Vine Reclamation, nothing special, but you know it's going to fit in well into decks. Gargo's Vicious Watcher, Hydra Tribal, that's really interesting. Ikalia Zenith Seeker, I feel like this was 8 years after the fact, an apology for making Kalia the first time. This is really not a bad Kalia. I know a lot of people are going to say she's not as good, but she's tame, which isn't necessarily worse. She's going to draw a lot less attention, but she's going to give you a lot of advantage. You have to realize she has vigilance too, so it's not like you're leaving yourself wide open with the previous Kalia. You get to look at the top 6 and then add one of each of those creature types to your hand. So the top 10 list, let's start it off here. Number 10 is Flood of Tears. This is really just blues removal, and I think it's going to see a bunch of play. It's going to be overshadowed by a lot of other cards in the set, no doubt about it, but I think it's really sweet. In Commander, you're likely going to return 4 or more non-token permanents to your hand, so you're then able to put whatever permanent card you want to from your hand onto the battlefield. It didn't even have to be on the battlefield previously, so if you have something crazy, like an Eldrazi just waiting in your hand, you can put it into play, and every other non-land permanent was returned to their owner's hands. This is a trend you're starting to see now with Crush of Tentacles, other similar cards, where in blue, it's not just enough to bounce everything back to their owner's hands. You want to get something out of the deal. It is sorcery speed after all, which is going to work against it. Number 9 is Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting kind of sick of these good stuff 5-color generals. It's going to see some Commander play because it's basically Solemn Simulacrum. And I'm not just talking about the ability. If you look at similarities with that card and this one, you have this story outside of the lore where a sentient machine is finding faith. It's a story that's been told before in science fiction, and I'm guessing that's what they wanted to do here with Golos. The ability, though, is a lot of mana and you get to cast stuff for free, which is why I'm guessing it's so expensive, but it's only the top 3, and it is possible to whiff on something like that, so you're paying a lot of mana to potentially whiff. I don't like that. The design isn't that unique, it's just Solemn Simulacrum on a Commander. It does allow you, however, to get whatever land you want, so if you want to do the whole Dark Depths combo, that is a possibility. You could also just get really good lands like a Guy's Cradle. Number 8 is Rene, Angel of Rebirth. I think that's how you say the name. Might have just terribly butchered it, but who cares? This is the Buy a Box promo, doesn't actually come in the set. This is what I'm talking about with Commanders. You gotta get a little weird, but synergizing with multicolored cards, it has been done before. We see a lot of cards like this in the recent Ravnica block, Hero of Precinct 1. You also have cards from Alara that synergized with multicolored cards. But this is Naya. We don't really have a whole lot you can do. You either have really big dinosaurs or you have Marath. So it was nice to see this kind of card, especially with Aristocrats. Now we have a way to refill our hand. You can run out of gas in creature decks, and that's typically the problem you're going to face in Naya. So if I have to build a Commander, this is definitely on my radar. Number 7 is Kathas the Hidden Hand, probably from a hidden African elvish land. Interesting character to say the least. The whole synergy with legendary cards, it's something we've seen a lot more of in Dominaria with the historic mechanic. Probably a lot easier to do in Commander than you think, because there's just a lot of legendary cards. We have legendary lands. All you have to do is incorporate some kind of graveyard strategy and you can make something like this work pretty well. It is pretty risky though. You are exiling casting 2 legendary cards from your graveyard. That is a pretty big price just to be able to cast legendary cards from your graveyard. So for the majority of the game, you have to anticipate this guy is just going to be cost reduction for your legendary spells until late game. Number 6 is Omnath, Locust of the Royal. I'm glad we finally get to see this glorified booger again. The design is actually really good. This is what I appreciate on commanders. ETB is going to deal damage to a target equal to the number of elementals you control, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on a target elemental you control. If you control 8 or more lands, you draw a card. So right there, that last part, 8 or more lands you get to draw a card, means you're not just going to hit the ground running. You have to establish a board state before you really get to profit off of it. So it's not going to be immediately just a landfall strategy, get a ton of elementals like Locust of Rage. You have to commit to the mid to late game, and then you get to have a lot of fun. Then you get to draw more cards, focus on landfall then. It shouldn't be difficult to get to 8 lands. I'm not going to try to make it sound like you can't get there pretty quickly, but you have a more interesting elemental focused theme here to build around as well. Number 5 is Chandra, Awakened Inferno. For the love of God, I've been waiting forever to actually have a good mono red planeswalker in Commander. We've had some that were playable. This is one that's just going to piss a lot of people off, and I love that. Dare to threaten the entire table with an emblem that deals damage to you on your upkeep. It just starts out at 1, and people are going to freak out about it anyway. They can't deal with emblems. I've heard people bitching about how you can't remove emblems. She can't be countered, so you're going to be at least guaranteeing yourself an activation of her +2. Someone could stifle it, of course, but if you're playing something like Nekasar or just any kind of burn deck, in Commander, this is a planeswalker for you. And I've been waiting for something actually playable if you want to go with burn. Number 4 is Kaiko, Wind's Fury. Another issue I have with legendary creatures in this set is that they kind of just decided to wave the white flag here. Problem I have with commanders when they make new ones is that they're either going to storm or combo off in some kind of way. And sure enough, making a commander that rewards you for storming off by generating more mana for getting those spirits, you have a storm engine here. And no one's going to try to build around it in a fun way, in a fair way, where you could just build up creature tokens and just try to play decent control. You had to go the storm route, and while I will acknowledge it is pretty powerful, it's just not good design. Sort of why I didn't really like Golos being the typical good stuff 5-color general. There's got to be more to your commander than just that one direction, and you could most certainly build a tame non-creature version of the deck that just takes advantage of creature tokens, but you know that's not how the majority of people are going to play with this kind of commander. So it's powerful, it's definitely going to win you a lot of games. Storm tends to be pretty good in Commander. You're in 3 colors, so you have access to a lot of competitive EDH cards. Silence someone when you want to storm off. But there is one that is even more despicable. Number 3, Yarok the Desecrated. I'm starting to notice this trend now. We saw this with Prime Speaker Vanifar, where they just take a really good artifact and decide, we're not going to make anything new, we're just going to turn a legendary creature into that artifact. This time, of course, Yarok is Panharmonicon, because we really wanted a Panharmonicon commander. I've said this multiple times, and reasons why I don't like cards like Palinchron, and then they just keep making cards that can abuse Palinchron. I'm just over here losing my mind over it, and there's like a million other things that are super powerful when you can double their ETBs like Massacre Worm, but it is again just not good design. You took the lazy way here, Wizards. And for some reason, Wizards of the Coast seems to have this creepy Sultai fetish. Things like Leovold in the past, Muldrotha. So yes, it's going to see a lot of play because people like doubling their ETBs and they think it's really cool. But here is my message to you, to all of you. Kill it when you see it. In the number 2, we have a card that I think is really cool in a direction. I think we need to see more cards like this that are a bit more symmetrical. Makes sense though, the card is called Scheming Symmetry. So if you like cards like Imperial Seal, Vampiric Tutor, but you don't want to spend that much money for those cards, it's not always the worst thing to give your opponent a card from their deck on top of their library, especially if you're playing in a multiplayer game where there's politics. You never know if helping someone out could help your position in the game in the long run. May not help if you're playing the most powerful deck at the table. So if you're playing something like Yarok, definitely don't do this. But if you're playing something a little bit more tame like Kathas or the new Kalia, something that's not going to be viewed as an immediate threat, or even Group Hug, you can make a Group Hug deck that plays black Helping someone else get a card from their deck can solve so many problems. And notice how it says 2 players? It doesn't even have to be you. You could choose 2 other players at the table. If you're now in the mode of arch enemy and there's one guy trying to go off and combo, he's like a turn away from winning. Why not help other people who could have better answers than you? Everything about this card is fantastic. It's well designed. Introducing this to a format that already loves tutors, I think it's a pretty good choice. And then we have number 1, which I'm going to kind of take the cheap route here, but let's be honest. The 5 Cavaliers are freaking awesome. If you played with the Titans in Commander, if you played with the Primordials, if you played with the Gear Hulks, you notice that there is the trend of Wizards of the Coast whenever they make a set like this. It's been a while since we had the Gear Hulks. Now we need another cycle of pretty good creatures where they give you one in every color and they all kind of share the same title. This time around we have the Cavaliers, and hopefully, unlike the Cleveland Cavaliers, they have more than just a few years of relevance. I think they're pretty good. You get good ETB triggers, you get good death triggers. You have Cavalier of Dawn, of Gales, of Night, of Flame, and of Thorns. Cavalier of Dawn is probably my favorite. That's just because I like removal. But it dies, you can also return an artifact or an enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. Of Gales is basically an ETB for Brainstorm. It dies, you shuffle it into your library, and then you scry 2. Cavalier of Night, you sacrifice a creature, destroy a creature. When it dies, you can return a creature card, CMC 3 or less, back to the battlefield from your graveyard. Cavalier of Flame is kind of like a fire-breathing effect. Also lets you discard your hand, you get to draw that many cards. Also really good if you're playing something like Lord Windgrace, because then you can deal damage equal to the number of lands in your graveyard. Cavalier of Thorns is pretty good. Helps you get a land from the top of your deck. And when it dies, you can put something from your graveyard on top of your library. So these are really good cards. They do multiple things. It's not just a good ETB like with the Titans, however. So if you want to build a deck around aristocrats, you could throw in something like Cavalier of Dawn. In fact, I almost assure you it's going to see a ton of Commander play just for that reason alone. These are just really good multi-dimensional cards that are going to fit into a lot of decks. They're monocolored cards with 3 mana symbols in their cost, so it might be a little bit more difficult to fit them into more than 2 color decks. But because they do multiple things, because they ETB and they do something when they die, it's going to make them a ton of fun to play with. It's going to make them easy to fool around with. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this top 10 list of cards that I think are going to be pretty good from Core Set M20. Not the most creative when it comes to the Commander options, the 3-color ones, but we do have some standouts, some that I think are pretty good, pretty tame, not super threatening. But the goal is to have fun cards, well-designed fun cards. And you could tell with a couple of cards here that they chose not to do that. But anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.